We'll start in a couple of minutes. We'll just wait for more attendees to join. It's a growing list of attendees today. We'll just wait for 1 more minute. Thank you. My name is Saurabh. I am from MoEngage. I'm the General Manager, Vice President, Sales for Southeast Asia ANZ in Japan. And today's topic is data to revenue, maximizing customer lifetime value through a unified data and engagement strategy. We have a guest speaker today who's an expert in data and engagement strategies. But before we get there, I'll do a very brief introduction of MoEngage for people who are on a MoEngage webinar or any MoEngage event for the very first time, just so you all know what we do as a company and why we've invited an expert who's going to talk about data and engagement strategy. Very brief introduction. I won't take more than 3 minutes to acquaint you all with what MoEngage do as a company. We are a customer data, analytics, and engagement powerhouse. We are a SaaS company. We sell a platform to B2C organizations, and the platform allows our customers to combine all data sources into MoEngage, analyze user behavior, and then build engagement strategies from there. Obviously, with the help of AI, that's across the entire layer of our platform. So data sources coming in from web, iOS, Android apps, API backends, offline data coming in via SFTP or CSV uploads, different kinds of CDPs in the market today. So we integrate with all of them. And then the data goes into MoEngage platform, creating a single view of the customer, where our customers, such as AirAsia MOVE, and Michael from AirAsia MOVE will join us in a bit, can analyze customer behavior and segment customer behavior, analyze customer behavior, and then build their engagement strategies at scale across multiple channels and be able to personalize their digital entities for every single user at scale. So every user sees content that's relevant to them. All powered by Agentic AI, which has been a recent launch at MoEngage. That's the basic overview. If anybody's interested in a very detailed conversation on what MoEngage can potentially do for your organization, feel free to reach out to us afterwards. Our customers get access to this dashboard. For anyone who doesn't know what MoEngage do, this is basically for them. And they can analyze data, segment, engage, etc. The customers we work with, a huge list globally today, and some of the larger logos in Asia, Australia, New Zealand market that we work with. With that, coming to the topic of today, data to revenue, maximizing customer lifetime value through a unified data and engagement strategy. Given that we work in the market of, in the field of data and CRM, we get to work with some of the finest brains in the industry who understand all things around data and CRM. And I'm very pleased and honored to welcome today's expert here, Head of CRM from AirAsia MOVE. Michael Min joins me today from Malaysia. Michael, can I please have you on the screen and request you to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the warm greeting and introductions, Saurabh. Just do a quick round of introductions for me. I have 8 years of experience in CRM. I believe some of you may have met me in person. You may have met me across different industries, whether from fintech, travel, B2C, SaaS, OTT, and automotive. And I'm looking forward to having a discussion and also enlightening you guys on how we can handle some of the questions you may have, and also, of course, on the main topic of leveraging data to maximize revenue.
Great. Thank you for joining, Michael. If anybody's got any questions for Michael during the course of today's conversation, please feel free to use the Q&A section on Zoom and throw in your questions. We have our backend operations team looking at any questions coming in, and they'll filter those out to me and Michael. So first topic for today, identification of relevant data sources. Data, the word data has been thrown around for 2 decades now. The one challenge I see a lot of enterprise companies struggle with is to identify what data sources are even relevant for them. Once they're able to identify those data sources, they can do something with it, potentially figure out how to convert that data into revenue. But how do enterprises go around building understanding of what data sets are relevant for them. AirAsia Move as an example. While I was preparing for today's conversation with Michael, we learned AirAsia serves 400 destinations globally, 400 destinations across 25 countries, serves more than 55 million passengers annually, which would be generating a lot of data for AirAsia Move team. As an example, people visiting website, installing the app, searching for flight routes, searching for pricing, and then maybe they drop off the website, they don't finish the booking, etc. Or every single part in this journey creates a data point that AirAsia Move team can leverage, learn from, etc. So my opening question to Michael: how does the AirAsia team identify what data sets to capture? How do you clean them up, and how do you put them to good use? Michael, over to you.
Thanks, Saurabh. Okay, so that's a very broad question. I think what I'll do is I'll answer from our perspective. So, AirAsia Move is a subsidiary of a larger company associated with AirAsia. I think having said this, right, there's a lot of associations when it comes to air travel. When people think about air travel, there's some obvious parts of the customer journey, right? So, for example, when users are searching for a flight, when they check in, when they drop their bags off, when they reach the gate, etc. So there's already how do I say this, expectations around what kind of data points people expect AirAsia Move, who's the owner of the AirAsia airline app, to capture. So there's some important ones which I've already mentioned, right? Things like if users are checking in online or offline, and when they do it, where they do it, etc. Um, we also capture when users purchase additional baggage online. Uh, uh, we also capture data offline. For example, when passengers have confirmed to receive to land on their destination, right, based on how many of them were boarded, etc. Um, a quick one on AirAsia Move before we start. So we talk a lot about flights, but AirAsia Move, we've expanded beyond flights. We support hotels, ride, insurance, pretty much end to end travel related, right? So including eSIMs, duty free, etc. So having said this, right, because there's so many what we call lines of businesses and product and servicing offers, we need to be very smart about how much, how do I say this, how much data we want to utilize, because again, if there's too much data we don't use, that's actually pretty much is wasteful. Also incurs a lot of work. If there's any product or technology people in the audience, you guys may have had scenarios where business teams would request for more data than they would ever use. So we want to avoid this. Now, coming back to AirAsia and AirAsia Move, um, again, there's key parts of the customer journey that we want to track, right? So there's check-ins when users are sent flight reminders, including additional things like if they've purchased any ancillary items. There's a lot of data points around this. The way we approach it is the airline portion. So if you're going to be taking a flight, that portion for us is like the protein in a meal. And our decision here is, as a kitchen, how do we complete that package, right? Because we want to provide an end-to-end service. What is the side? What is the sauce? Are we going to have different condiments and decorations, etc.? So that's the way we approach it. It's very broad and generic. However, the key point here is we AirAsia Move is associated with an established airline company. We have a lot of data already. We already have an expectation in terms of what data we send, how we use it, and also the kind of benefits we get from sending this data to tools like MoEngage. Yeah, so I think that's just to start. I think maybe we can start by identifying how we can map the customer journey, right? So there's some
Okay.
obvious things. Yeah. For us, it usually starts from a search, whether it be from hotels, flight, or Snap, which is one of our products where we include flights and hotels. I hope everyone here in the audience have installed our app. If you receive too many push notifications, I
Mhm.
apologize. You can send email to myself. So the most important part of deciding what to send in terms of data or creating a data point is making sure your customer journey makes sense. uh, what do I mean by making sense? I don't mean that it should be 100% accurate. I don't mean that it should be 100% thorough and it should map out every single possible permutation. I don't think that's correct. What you need to look at is, as a business or a function owner, or maybe you're from the commercial team and you have to work with different teams to understand how we can get more revenue. And this kind of, you're trying to get into two things, right? What to send and when to send it. That's actually what you want to solve for. Um, from our side, we have a typical, flight search. We have the typical making the booking, getting on the flight, etc. However, for especially in travel industry, there's scenarios where customer journey might look very, how do I say this, very skinny in the middle. What do I mean by that is, let's say users make a search. There might be a couple of search data points. There'll be one booking event or multiple booking events, and then there'll be a flight event, right? A data point where we know the user is flying on a certain day. For certain industries like this, the time between booking date and flight date actually is also a clue. Again, coming to making it look skinny, there'll be a period where once a user has gotten what they expect of a ticketing platform or a travel platform, they might not engage as much. But that space between that quiet space between two engagement points is actually a clue for you guys. So for us, that the duration of that quiet period might indicate that there's a purpose to it, right? So we see a lot of business travelers, they travel within 7 days, and a lot of groups who travel for holiday, usually a little bit further away, book a lot in advance. So when you are mapping your customer journey, don't how do I say this, don't feel awkward when there's a long quiet area, right? So that's actually an opportunity for you guys to kind of look into a little bit deeper.
Got it.
Yeah. I think there's some other points. We have data points collecting when they arrive at the airport. We have data points to indicate uh, you know, when they depart, when they, how do I say this, arrive at their destination. We also create additional data, right? So by way of sending users requests for explicit information. So what this is like surveys, NPS and CSAT scores. This way, when users are giving us their feedback about the flight, that's an additional data point. So on this note, right, a lot of teams are a little bit, how do I say this, a little bit shy to request for input from our customers, right? So I know I say this, but in reality, it's a very difficult exercise. The idea here is just like how you would send comms to your users at the right place at the right time, you also want to ask for it, feedback at the right place and the right time. This is a super important data point. This will tell you exactly which aspects that are not viewable in your data metrics that you can work on.
Got it. Michael, any wow examples of use cases that have made your customers' life easier in their journey? I am a frequent traveler of AirAsia, as you know, living in Singapore. It's just so convenient taking a quick flight into KL or Indonesia.
Mhm.
And I love the fact that I can, at least in Malaysia, I can, book the flight, even book the taxi, my travel insurance. Everything is from one app, which makes life super easy. I've had experiences where I've had to claim things, and that also is super easy afterwards. So for me, there's a lot of wow factor working with AirAsia now as a customer, but flying with AirAsia for the last decade. How do you come up with this data use cases that create such wow factor for your consumers?
Um, so I'll cover our use case. Maybe not so much WoW because we're a legacy company in a way. So I think for those in the audience with online presence, right? So let's say your product or service can be purchased or experienced online. If it's very, how do I say this? If it's a search driven, or intent driven. So what that means is maybe you land users directly onto a search screen or a product display page, right? The really easy one is uh, kind of engagement automations. So what I mean by that is things like drop-offs, whether it be cart abandonment or sign up abandonment. If you're, let's say you're in the banking industry and you have users who are filling in a form, but then they abandon. Now, for many of us, at least in the digital space, this is very obvious. It's one of the first few things that you will want to work on. But we need to remember, right, for a meaningful group of our customers, uh, they're we cannot assume that they're dropping off because they're not interested, right? There's many reasons. For myself, I
Such
might,
as?
yeah. So for if I'm very busy in the day, and I remember having a discussion with maybe my colleagues during lunch, and they say, oh, maybe travel to Korea is a good time. I might make a search and then not engage for a while because I might have to go back to office, as an example. So, instead of a wow moment, I guess, from our perspective, from these user segments who perform maybe one search and then drop off, having these automations are a very good reminder for them, and it gets them back on the track, right? It's an actual reminder. It's a value we bring to our users. Um, is it wow? I don't think it's so much wow for us because it's such an industry standard, but for our users, I think there's scenarios where, oh wow, they find it useful. Um, Maybe I'll slide into another more interesting example,
Yeah.
right? So, uh, as mentioned previously, right, a key metric we look at is flight searches as is a key metric we do because it measures, it filters out users with a degree of intent as well as tells us what they're interested in specifically. Um, we have a certain group of users who perform many flight searches, all within, how do I say this, 7 days departing and 7 days arriving. So what that tells us is these users, they're looking for the best deal possible, right? These
Got
are
it.
users who don't have an itinerary and they don't mind making an itinerary based around the best deal possible in terms of flights and hotel bookings. So what we do for these customers, if we know that they're high intent and if we know that they're looking at the best rate within a given window, we're rolling out price drop notifications or price changes, so that they're informed. We're adding value to our users, even before they transact, right? So we're telling them, hey, we know you're looking for the best deal, for the specific route. We can either communicate to them, hey, this is the best deal in the next 30 days, depending on
Yeah.
how your how dynamic your pricing is for your product or service. Yeah, it's just another one, I guess, wow example of one of the things we're doing.
Got it. You and I spoke about data tracking in terms of people checking in, checking out at the airport or online when we were preparing for today's
Mm.
conversation. You also mentioned there's a lot of visa-free agreements now, which reduces friction. So that's creating more passenger travel
Yep.
behavior, more data points coming in, which is
Yep.
great. I think after COVID, what airline and the travel industry went through for those 2 years, I think you guys are finally starting to see the industry booming again, which is great. Um, Identifying travel trends. I use the ASEAN Pass with AirAsia. I think I need to get the APAC travel card as well so I can travel visa free. But ASEAN Pass is a very handy benefit for someone like me. For people who don't know what ASEAN Pass is, that's an AirAsia service. Please go look it up. It's great if you're traveling often. How does your team come up with these offers? What kind of data points actually help you drive these kind of decisions? That I think AirAsia is the only org that has something like an ASEAN Pass. Um, how do you get to that kind of decision making?
Yep. So, I mean, this is not all, this is an output from, it's a company-wide initiative. It's not something that, one team comes up with. It took years of understanding and actually attempts. This is not the first subscription model we've rolled out previously. Um, so in terms of identifying gaps in the market or opportunities, uh, there's several ways to go about it. One is looking at the customer journey as an example. When we look at all the data points that you've input in the hypothetical journey that you've mapped out, you can easily identify gaps. For example, let's say that there's a big gap between users who launch the app, try to check in, and then they don't complete their check-in, online check-in, as an example. These friction points you can look at optimizing for and creating new products and services or enhancements in this case. Um, I can't speak too much about how we roll out larger products. We recently rolled
Yeah,
out Easy Cancel. Yep, Easy Cancel is a very important service where users are, they would pay for a little bit more, but get their full refund back or most of it. Now, this specific example is born by a lot of feedback from our audience. Uh, how do I say this? There's been scenarios previously where full refunds were not possible. So by offering this new product or service, it fills that need from our customers' perspective.
got it.
Yeah, coming back to what you said previously, though, like regarding visa free and flight delays, reminders. So these things are also another data point that doesn't exist in your organization. It's just something that you need to be aware of as well. So a lot of e-com companies, they have a lot of control over their product and service. So what do I mean by that is they know exactly what SKUs and how many of those SKUs are available. However, for some other industries, let's say service providers or those in the travel industry, there's a lot of external influence that will affect your the providing of the service. These sort of data points also need to be catered for in a way. These are the known unknowns. So as an example, for AirAsia, we do need to keep an eye out on, flight cancellations or weather alerts or, other alerts in sort of more unsafe markets if there's like political tension. The other big one is visa-free agreements. These are when governments announce that there'll be, visa-free agreements between, countries, usually bilateral. These are also huge in terms of reducing the friction. All of a sudden, users who didn't want to go through the visa process have to go to an interview, have to pay for, visa fees. Now they're a lot more inclined. And of course, you can stitch that data point up with flight searches and other supplementary information, and that should get you there.
That's very handy. I had an incident last week. Now that you mentioned political unrest, there was a protest in Manila, and I landed there Sunday. And I obviously AirAsia doesn't fly from Singapore directly to Manila, so I had a different airline on that evening. But I got a notification from this airline that there's a political rally happening in Makati City.
Yeah,
So add on your travel times, and we couldn't even get a taxi after we landed. So airlines taking that level of initiative is very, very helpful for passengers to be aware of what's happening in a certain market. Typhoon, flight delays, I think all those data points are not directly being captured from your ecosystem. They're coming from third parties. But again, all of that comes into a platform like MoEngage, and then you trigger timely communication to make sure that the consumer, the passengers, aware. So it's not just about selling them new things. It's also about making sure that they're aware of what's happening on the ground.
correct.
Um, so just summing up the first part of the conversation. From flight booking to checking in online or checking in at the airport, all of that data gets captured. Personally, from me, what I like about the experience with AirAsia is not having to print the boarding pass at all. It's issued online. You get a QR code that you can just scan at the airport and just walk in. The other service that I personally really like that AirAsia has introduced is hailing a cab service at KL Airport, and I hope you can expand that in other parts of the world, because the moment you land, AirAsia sends a notification via their own app that now you've landed at the airport. Do you need a taxi? And then it guides you to the taxi pickup location as well. I think data is powering all of that, which is great. And MoEngage is not playing a part in everything. A lot of that is your internals apps working, which is great to see. Moving to the next topic for today, the data powering customer lifetime value. The concept of customer lifetime value can be very different for every organization. I have one example from one of our big retail customers in the Philippines. They're called Robinson's Retail. I think they manage about 17, 18 retail businesses. Very successful business, family owned, but the family is still running it. One of the largest organizations in the Philippines. Personally, I've been to a lot of their stores. Across these 17 brands, you can buy groceries, you can buy toys. They own the rights to Daiso in the Philippines. So there's a lot of product that you can buy from within the organization, but they're all different retail stores, different websites. So customer lifetime value for them is not just one brand. An organization like Robinson's Retail would want to see people engaging with them across multiple brands. um, for an organization like AirAsia MOVE, how would you define customer lifetime value? And for other brands focusing on maximizing customer lifetime value, how do brands go about bringing new products and services in the market? If that makes sense.
Yep. I think just for the audience, in case customer lifetime value is not how do I say this, a known vocabulary, is basically a measure of how much one individual brings to your business in terms of revenue. There's several ways to calculate it, but one of the simplest ways is, looking at how much they purchase in one go. How many purchases they do in, let's say, a year, and typically, what is the retention period of that user? So how many years do they continue purchasing? So these three metrics add up to CLV. Um, Sorry, not add up. You will multiply them. It's one way to calculate CLV. So knowing these three kind of foundational metrics, you can drive CLV in several ways, right? You can either upsell them, get them to purchase more in one go. Two is get them to purchase more frequently, and three is to make sure that they continue purchasing for many more years or many more months, depending on your type of industry. Um, Having said this, I think it's really important when we talk about CLV is to make sure that people don't stick to CLV values like it's a promise. When performance marketers, they run acquisition campaigns, I've seen scenarios where CLV is used to calculate ROI on it, which is very creative. But in terms of more CRM specific angle, I this is the way we would approach it. CLV is a lens, right? Customer lifetime value is a lens. So what do I mean by that? So it's a lens because you're observing something, in this case, the value of a customer to your business. And depending on the way you look at it, it will change. And the reason why you need to change your lenses, even for one user or a group of users, is because your consumers are so diverse, right? You're gonna have one type of consumers where they would purchase, a big amount in one go and never return. On the other end, you might see users who purchase, the lowest value good, but every week for a year, as an example. So because you have such a diverse range of customers, and this cuts across every industry, you're going to get this sort of behavior and diversity in banking, in e-com, in travel. It cuts across everything. So this is why CLV looking at CLV as a lens is super important. So we'll talk about the lenses now. Um, when we talk about CLV, having one number to represent all your customers or the average customer is not very useful. That's like, you know, uh, for 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 those younger in the audience, that's like taking the average of all your subject grades and then outputting it, right? As an example. I don't think that's very useful because it doesn't highlight, who you are, what you're interested in, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, right? As an example, as an individual. When we flip this into the more customer consumer relationship, you want to look at user states, you want to look at behaviors. So as an example, let's say your product or service, you're operating in a monopoly or duopoly environment, as an example. You may, when you look at CLV, let's say you want to segment by users who receive marketing comms versus not receiving marketing comms. And the reason why you want to use this lens is to see in what aspects can you make your segmentation better, as an example, or is there business appetite to drive more opt-ins or more reachability, right? As an example. So how would you approach this? One way is to use the CLV lens. In a duopoly or a monopoly environment, you may often see, and I've seen this personally, is opted out users typically have a very high CLV, right? Which is surprising because you would think that marketing activities will kind of stimulate spending, but because your industry, your company or your organization operates in a duopoly or monopoly environment, they have no choice. So regardless of uh, uh, different marketing approaches, there'll be a large segment that continue to purchase regularly without having to have that marketing push. So if you split into users who have received the comms, not received the comms, and then users who have opted out and not opted out, that will give you an idea of the difference between CLV will tell you what their opportunity is or what value a certain business activity is bringing to the organization. Another one is this is super important, especially for those in banking, looking at key milestones. Users who deposit one time a month for 3 months straight. As an example, let's say you do your retention studies and you realize that if certain users are depositing their monthly salary for 3 months, then they'll continue to deposit forever. As an example, or those in the fintech industry, you may want to look at users who pay X amount of times through your app within a given time frame, right? So once you achieve that, and run of course you need some historical data on this. You typically around 6 to 12 months. Once you have identified these milestones, you can actually start to measure what is the customer lifetime value of those who don't achieve the milestone versus those who have. From there, different teams can agree on, because you have data now, right? As opposed to so-called logic and common sense. Now that you know that there's data and there's numbers to it, then you can actually start planning actual business activities around how do we get these users to reach the milestone, right? So that's another different project that you can roll out. Yeah. That's a lot about CLV. I think in general, regarding
So,
Mhm.
sorry, one question. What you just said earlier about CLV. So we shouldn't have one CLV approach for the entire segment of customers we
um,
are trying to reach out to. We should segment them in different buckets and then look at CLV based on a segmentation approach.
Yeah. So
Like,
if there's finance professionals in our audience, I'm sorry to say, but finance and accounting people love having one number for the entire customer base. It's a they love these simple numbers because I guess their work is very complicated. But if you're a CRM practitioner or sorry, CRM or product, you want to split these out because one average number is not great. It will tell you if one average number, if it's increasing, it will tell you, okay, things are seemingly okay. When it's decreasing, it doesn't give you any opportunity to learn because all it says it's revenue is probably going down as well. That's all it would say.
got it. Okay. So now let's say you have a finance professional who likes your approach. They're okay to segment customers in different buckets, understanding the
Yep.
data, and then they decide that the metric of customer lifetime
Mm,
value
yep.
should not be one metric. It should be segregated by segments that we are serving in the market.
Yep.
Using that, is there a way to analyze if new products and services can potentially be introduced for different segments?
I think so. CLV in itself cannot identify the gaps that we mentioned, and
Okay,
the reason why is uh it's it's we talk about bucketing it or slicing it down, but each bucket is already very big because no two buckets are the same, right? So in that scenario, if you're looking at Sylvie in its own, it'll be very hard to identify opportunities. However, having CLV in buckets that are meaningful will help you understand which bucket to zoom into, right? In the previous example, and when we look at users who have opted out, right, from comms, let's say as an example, and their CLV
got
is
it.
high, compared to those who are receiving comms, but their CLV is maybe half of the other group. That'll give you a signal. I'm saying, and to say what is going on with this group, right? Why aren't they, even though they're receiving the best deals and the best offers, what is happening here, and they'll give you a clue as to what you should be focusing on.
Got it. Got it. And thinking from a consumer perspective, Michael, if we look at customer lifetime value from a brand perspective, we work with some of the big retail brands also in Southeast Asia, and they're always looking for customer lifetime value. But if I look at it from a consumer perspective, if I'm the
Mm,
consumer today, if AirAsia is not my customer, I'm the customer of AirAsia, I don't know the metric CLV as a consumer. What
mm,
I think of is this brand adding enough value in my life? What is the what is the equity on the table for me to continue using? I'm not loyal to this brand, but
mm.
this brand serves a purpose for me. Which, if you flip it from a brand perspective, we say brand loyalty. But if you flip it back to the consumer perspective, is this brand enough relevant enough for me? What's your perspective on how do the consumer thinks about brand loyalty or brand equity, as
Yep.
opposed to the brand thinking about customer lifetime value?
Yep. Okay. I think that's super fair. So CLV from the brand's perspective is a fiscal number that we can use to represent an individual or a group of individuals, right? So that's from the brand's perspective, like you said. But from the user side, how do we know that that CLV metric is at its maximum, as an example? Or how do we have a uh, how do we get a sense of that number? Is it high? Is it low? What are we doing that can make it better, right? But at some point, you also come to a scenario where you're resource constrained, where you cannot do everything at the same time, right? So one of the key metrics that I believe many organizations to look at is, this term called brand loyalty. It's a very fluffy term, but actually it's a pretty deep topic, right? So in summary, as a CRM practitioner, when I think about brand loyalty, my definition of brand loyalty is given, if a user purchases a certain good or service X times, how many of those times are with your brand, right? So, a good way to say it is, let's say a user flies with AirAsia or takes a, ride hailing, 4 times a year, let's say, as an
Yeah.
example. How many of those times are with AirAsia Move? So that will give you an idea of the cap that you're approaching. So when we talk about brand loyalty, right? So having defined it already, we can get into the topic. It's if we use that metric, so what share of that user do you own, right? Pretty much, very similar to market share, but from a customer's perspective. Um, I think in terms of actioning on this, you can break it down into a few topics, right? So when you talk about uh, positioning the brand in a way where you're developing habits in the customer's user, um, the more I talk about this, the more it sounds like some X-Men sort of stuff where you're trying to like hypnotize people to utilize your product or service. But for an app like Move, right, we need our customers to associate a Move with any sort of travel, right, domestic, international, even within intra-city, right, as an example. So we break it down into a few categories. So we have 5 categories, and these are just a checklist in terms of what you should be looking at. And I'm breaking down brand loyalty in a way, right? So every organization will be different, but for my practice, we look at it this way. The first item is time back. Did we save the users mental effort or time in minutes, right? And these are actual measurable items that you can look at. Maybe not mental effort, but at least time saved, right? Are you
Yeah.
giving them, as an OTA, as an example, uh, how many minutes, how many minutes of searching did your platform save the user? So that's one. These are very experiential things. The customer won't know that they saved 4 minutes 56 seconds. What they'll feel is, wow, I actually got a very good experience from this. I got exactly what I wanted in the shortest amount of time. As a perception. Next one, uncertainty. Did we reduce doubt where possible, right? So as an example, uh if you're in e-com, how do you reduce the doubt for users to A, put their credit card details on your platform, and B, make a large, uh, relatively large, according to the user, depending on the user, uh, how do you make them to purchase a large amount in one go, as an example? How do you go about this? With AirAsia Move, what we do is, we add in insurances, we leverage on the fact that we have the best network in the region. So what that means
Yeah.
is, if one flight gets canceled, more changed, there'll be another flight within the same day, guaranteed. Um, so that's one way of certainty. The third one is control. Uh, how how much control does a user have over their experience? I think this aspect is very different across demographics. Older individuals with established habits, like I think you and me, all right, we're not young birds anymore. We
I
have a
agree.
preferred way of using apps, and
Yeah.
if I open some apps today, I go crazy, right? Certain e-com apps, as an example, there's two major ones in Malaysia. They have all these features, vouchers, live streams. I don't know how to use it, honestly. Uh, I feel less control. However, when I use these apps, I know that the experience is going to be reliable. Therefore, I continue using it. So you can hedge against some of these items. So coming back to control, how much control does a user have over the experience, right? Over how much data is collected, as an example. You don't want to be too creepy. You don't want to use uh, time spent browsing as a way to segment or personalized communications, as an example, right? So how much control are you giving? And ideally, there's a balance to strike. If you give up too much control as a brand, you cannot generate that stickiness. If you take too much control from the user, the users have will feel like it's their space is being invaded, and of course it will lead to uninstalls and opt-outs, as an example. Next one's respect. So how much do we honor consent? So similar to control, I guess. If we are shouting out promos, how many of those promos are actually redeemable in the given time frame, as an example, right? So these are all forms of respect that we need to give our users. Um, in the how do I say this, online space, I know it can sound very obvious, right? The fact that promos have to work, but in reality, depending on the promo mechanics, I guess this will also apply to banking in a way where things need to be double, quadruple checked because the
Yep.
promos need to work, right? As an example, how much respect are you giving the customer? The last one's continuity. uh does your app does your product or service help drive the user to get what they want, right? Does it provide a way for users to pick up where they left off, as an example? um does it Are you allowing users to go deep into what they're interested in? So the reason why I say deep is, if you're into a more very complicated product, let's say you're in fintech, you have a bunch of stocks or ETFs that you offer on your platform. how
Yep.
how easy do you make it for that user to rediscover or re-find that obscure ETF that they were interested in previously, as an example? So these are the five different ways of kind of helping build habits from our users to drive brand loyalty, of course, to get that number up from, let's say, 4 out of 10 times in a year to 9 out of 10 times in a year.
Got it. That's very, very deep. And thanks for sharing that. We got about 10-15 minutes to sum up our conversation. There's a couple of questions also in chat which I'll get to you. So I'm just letting the audience know. I've made a note that there are a few questions which we will answer at the end.
Mhm.
Um, we've learned a lot from this conversation today, and I'm sure you've got a lot more to share. But given the limitation of time, there's only a bunch more questions that I have the liberty to ask. So I'll get to that. So what to sum up what I've learned from you here is look at different data sources, connect them with the use cases you want to implement. And there's one question which is actually similar to what I was about to ask. So I'll just read it out to you.
Sure.
With so many business lines running in your organization, AirAsia Move, There must be a lot of teams, which I'm aware of, and products involved, which again, we are aware of a lot of products. We spoke about that earlier. Each team will be running their own KPI and revenue targets. Move is running their own revenue targets as well. There might be a team just working on increasing hotel booking through AirAsia app, AirAsia MOVE app, and another one trying to increase insurance. Is that how you're structured? That one team's chasing insurance targets, one team's chasing hotel targets?
So we have different commercial teams across each line of business, right? So we have hotels, flights, etc. Their primary KPI is as such, but however, this sort of activity is cuts across so many functions.
Yeah,
I can see the question here. It says, how do you decide which products to push, and how does this impact CLTV? So
yeah,
that's a great question. So this is more relevant to larger enterprises, and sorry, or larger enterprises or enterprises that offer so many different pillars of services, right? So uh, to answer the first part, yes, there's different teams looking at different KPIs. In our example, we're talking about hotel booking, so we'll focus on that. So in terms of which, as a shared service, right? So our CRM teams a shared service across 13 major markets and across 6 different pillars of services. uh how do we push, how do we decide what to push? So I think there's two uh groups of data we need to consume. One is the obvious, right? So the numerical physical portion. How important is the revenue coming in? What is the margin on said revenue? What is the value we get from our users for that given product or service? So that's one. But as a large corporate with many teams, there's another category we need to consider, which is what is the goal, right? So sometimes we set internal goals. Let's say we need a certain market share for a certain product or service in a given year or two. If this is the goal and there's momentum towards it, then we would forego some revenue to achieve set goals, right? So it's a balancing act we play. In terms of CLTV, it's this is an area we need to improve more on. CLTV is not a metric we review frequently enough. We should do it a little bit more. Um, Frankly, it's a little difficult to do it across the board as well because not everyone agrees with one definition. So
yeah.
it's an aspect we need to improve on. But to answer the anonymous attendee, those are two categories of information that we need to digest and depend on. I'll say for something less, how do I say this, less visible. I guess that's the term, less visible. Let's say you have a much smaller product or service, right? And your margin is, let's say, not even 1%, as an example. I think in this case is a very obvious. You would demote this in terms of the priority, right? We can't necessarily exclude it from our shared service, right? We can't say no to them directly, but we can limit the how many users receive this communication and how frequently, as an example.
Got it. Got it. If there's any follow-up questions, attendees, please use this time to put them on the chat. Um, Moving on to summing up today's conversation, Michael, um, I want to revalidate some of the things we were talking about earlier. So you look at all the data sets, you analyze the use cases you want to go to market with. One of the things you repeatedly say, and I've known you for like 7-8 years now, so this is not a new conversation. Don't do things to the consumer, do things for the consumer. How do you do things for the consumer by analyzing these data sets? Can you sum up everything that you've told us in the last 50 minutes just with the phrase that you've been using in front of me for the last almost a decade?
Okay. So I think through my 8 years of in the CRM space, I know you obviously you know the intensity of work and experience is very different across the industries. I'll say this. Um, One thing that's been very obvious though is when you're doing something for your customers, the metrics will tell you the clue. So as mentioned, for example, price change notifications, right? I know it's For some users or some industries, it's very obvious, but the click-through rates and the engagement rates on certain, how do I say this, pre-transaction touch points can be easily 5 to 10 times higher than your generic marketing engagements. In terms of what we do for our customers, the customers will tell you when it's working for them. In a way, the numbers will show it. If you go ahead, look back and review through all your comms or your automations, and you pick out the top three that have the highest engagement, not necessarily conversions, but let's say highest engagement for now. Uh, that is what you should be focusing on. How do you drive this deeper, right? And uh, having said this, you need to split this into how narrow do you want to go, right? So let's say you do price change notifications, but if you want to optimize further, your addressable segment will be smaller and smaller. So at some point, there's only so much you can do for that user, for that given touch point. So you move on to a different touch point.
Got it. Got it. I had requested you 45 minutes for today's conversation. We have already 5 minutes, 7 minutes over time. So I'm okay to close the session in terms of you and I discussing, but if anybody has any questions, put it on the chat. There's one question that has just come in. What industries benefit the most from a unified data and engagement strategy? I think that's a very wide question. I will take the first stab, but then you can correct me if I go wrong somewhere. What
Sure.
industries benefit the most from unified data and engagement strategy? Ah, what industries? I think the personally, I think retail businesses benefit a lot from this. I would not say a company like MoEngage benefits a lot, like not a B2B company. In B2B space, you have a limited amount of customers you can sell your product to at any given time. I think the market size for MoEngage would be about 80 to 90,000 potential buyers, and today we are at about 1,500 customers. But in a B2C environment, first of all, a company like AirAsia MOVE, a company like Zalora, for people on the call from Singapore, um, Fair Price as an example, they have a lot of data that needs to be unified, and the consumer needs to be served based on that data. So retail, I would say, would probably be the winner here, and then followed by banking. And I would put AirAsia Move in the retail segment here, even though it's flights, but you're still selling online. Michael, you'd like to add on top of that?
I think yes, Sarab, I think your answer is pretty it will cover, the ideal user. So in terms of unified data and engagement, if you are serving either multiple demographics of customers. So what I mean by that is, if it's a very wide range, also across different geographies, right? Or you have uh more than one platform. So you would have not only web, but let's say web and app and a tertiary data source, which is, it could be your backend data services or an offline presence. I think any industry that satisfies any of these criterias can benefit from it. I'm not going to go more into it because I think it can be a very tricky decision to make, because if you have one user and they can only transact one time for certain industries, as an example, which platform do they do it is, of course, going to be part of your consideration, right? How much value is that one
Mhm.
customer compared to maintaining two different platforms, and of course, on top of that, having this unified data and strategy. Um, yeah, I think that'll be the answer for that question. I think it's a very big question. I think it can be a separate webinar, maybe
Eh,
next quarter.
I think that can be a separate 1 hour conversation, and I can bring in somebody from a big retail background, somebody from, I think you again from AirAsia, and I can think of somebody very big from banking industry as well, who can, and you guys can debate amongst each other on who's utilizing the data the best way. There's one more question on health insurance providers. Is there something you want to take, Michael?
I think so. Health insurance providers, health insurance. I'm not super familiar with the space, but I know the margins are great there. That's all I know. Having said this, uh, the difficult part about health insurance is it's similar to what I just mentioned. It's typically something that people purchase only a few times in their lifetime. So you maintain a very long relationship with them, right? So typically over several years. Um, I think that retention is a huge part. At least in Malaysia, we see a lot of retention being handled by agents, and I think a lot of the distribution happens through agents. So it's a natural fit that agents also handle retention. But if we're talking about best practices from our perspective, you may want to reduce the dependency on said agents to build that relationship with the brand itself as opposed to the agent. So would is it important to get a dedicated vendor for engagement? I don't think so, but it'll make it very easy. I'll give you an example. Let's say you can, once a user signs up, instead of having to remember to engage your customers directly, manually, where maybe you set up a calendar reminder or a task on Jira, you can set automations, right? Every year, wish them, and then ask them if they have claimed their yearly checkup that's covered under the insurance plan. I'm not sure, right? So the value add for these sort of initiatives and tools for health insurance is to help maintain that relationship, and of course decrease the dependency on agents, at least in Malaysia. I'm not too sure how other markets operate.
Got it. Got it. One last question, and then we'll sum it up. There's a very lengthy question on chat. I don't think I'm going to go to the entire length of it, but the last part of the question, I personally think people would be interested in hearing the answer from you. The importance of personalization in the context of AirAsia Move, and how does it impact? I think that's what the meaning of the gist of the question is. How does it impact customer lifetime value? Are you guys doing anything around personalization journeys? Um,
Yeah.
and how do you think that will impact CLTV?
Yeah, so we do a lot in terms of personalization. Almost all of our comms are personalized to different degrees. Um, we support so many different languages on our website. It's in terms of AI for copy. That's a good point. We didn't talk about AI enough, I think, this round, Sarah. Maybe next quarter we need to focus on it. Um, we are running tests. Uh, the reason why we haven't kind of made this a standard practice at AirAsia is because I think there's a degree of understanding and risk to this. We're trying to figure out in terms of AI for outbound comms, how much risk are we willing to tolerate, right? How much authority do we want to give up, as an example? We do limited testing at the moment. Tests are showing decent positive results so far. uh, Recommendations, we work very closely to our data science team. They digest information that we other vendors might not have access to. And also they can pull more quickly, so especially if for OTA booking. So on Move we sell tickets for many airlines across the world, right? So, and we
Yeah,
pull the prices dynamically. This sort of information will be hard to feed into any tool, so the data science team would consume it and then provide recommendations as an example. So yes, we do. AI, we're in a we do use a lot of AI in the back end work, right? Whether it would be developing scripts, developing products, etc. AI for copy and creatives, we're getting there. I think we're rolling out much larger scale tests, and we're ensuring that the risk is mitigated through guardrails. Um, can you speak to the importance of personalization? Of course. So, uh, personalization is a word that is thrown out a lot. Um, I think people get the concept of it, but to make it meaningful or to create a value adding personalization takes a long time. Um, when we talk about personalization for CLV, as mentioned previously, right, you cannot focus on one type of segment solely. I think that's uh, especially if it's very broad. You need to identify which one you want to tackle first, and then derive a personalized communication or personalized campaign for this bucket. Um, yes, I think that'll be my answer to this one.
Okay, got it. Look, there's a lot of questions that I think we'll have to skip because we're at exactly 2 p.m. I want to thank you again for making the time to join us for this conversation. I hope the audience learned a few new things from you. I definitely did, and I have for the last many years. Um, People on the call, our marketing team's just going to do a quick survey to check if this was a quality conversation and if I was a good host. So please give your rating here. Michael, I'll connect with you again soon. Thank you so much for joining and have a nice day ahead.
Thank you, Saurabh. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.